Imagine being ripped from a world where your biggest worry is your phone's battery and thrown into one where your daily worry is not dying. With no Google Maps to guide you, no Wikipedia to inform you, no filters to hide your imperfections. In the Middle Ages, your first morning would begin with the taste of blood in your mouth. Your teeth would rot without dentists, your body covered in parasites without medicine, your future limited to the same village where you were born. A Generation Z who grew up with instant answers and endless entertainment would face absolute terror, the interminable boredom of endless nights, lit only by candles, where a book cost a year's salary. If you knew how to read, you would be unable to wait 5 seconds to skip an ad. Now you would wait 6 months to find out if your harvest would be enough to avoid starving in the winter. This is the story of the mental breakdown that would occur when the most hyper-connected generation in human history faced medieval reality. A world where your life expectancy would be shorter than the current length of an Instagram story. Before understanding why you would collapse, we need to see the chasm between these two worlds. It's not just a matter of missing technology. It's a fundamental difference in reality. Your day begins now, not with the ringing of your phone or the TikTok notification, but with the rooster's cry, or more often, with the backache of a flea-infested straw mattress. There are no longer just 5 more minutes. The sun has risen, you get up. Period. Sleeping in isn't a choice. It's a cardinal sin called laziness. In a recent survey, teenagers reported checking their smartphones an average of 150 times a day. In the Middle Ages, you would check the same landscape, the same 30 faces, the same fields every day for the next 40 years, if you were lucky enough to live that long. There is no refresh, there is no such thing as something new. Do you think being without Wi-Fi for an hour is torture? In the Middle Ages, the only connection was to the land you plowed until your hands bled. A Stanford University study showed that modern young people begin to show signs of anxiety after just 45 minutes without their devices. Imagine a lifetime. The informational isolation would be overwhelming. In 2023, you consume about 74 GB of information daily. In the Middle Ages, perhaps 40 megabytes. Over a lifetime, a medieval peasant absorbed less new information in decades than you process during a single lunch scrolling through your feed. Monotony would be your first psychological killer. Think of Thomas, a 16-year-old from an English village in 1250. His day begins at 4:30 a.m. in the summer. He eats a piece of stale bread and perhaps a sip of wheat beer. Yes, even children drank alcohol, as the water was often contaminated. From 5 a.m. to 7 p.m., work in the fields. There are no business hours, no weekends, only periods of more intense or less intense work dictated by the seasons. A Pure Research survey showed that 72% of modern teenagers feel the need to respond immediately to notifications. In the Middle Ages, the only urgent notification was a storm approaching while your crops were still in the field. The only important message was the church bell announcing death, invasion, or fire. Historical statistics reveal that 95% of people never traveled more than 25 miles from their hometown. Your physical world would be smaller than a map file on your phone. While you swipe through hundreds of places on Instagram daily, a medieval person would spend their entire life seeing the same horizons, the same trees, the same stream. Your medieval diet would be the same every damn day, the same faces, the same conversations, the same horizon for decades, with no new angles, no new perspectives, no new filters, an eternity of repetition that would make any modern teenager go mad in a matter of days. And it's not just the lack of stimulation, it's the absence of the very concept of entertainment as you know it. There's no planned free time, no hobbies. When you're not working, you're getting ready to work, repairing tools, mending clothes, storing food. The concept of having fun or relaxing simply doesn't exist as we understand it today. In 2024, you can experiment with infinite online identities, chat with people halfway around the world, and consume infinite content. In 1250, your identity is fixed at birth, your interactions limited to the same people for life, and your mental content is almost entirely inherited from previous generations. And as you absorb this brutal reality, it's important to understand that the real crisis wouldn't just be the lack of technology, but something much deeper, an existential crisis of identity in a world where no one can like, share, or validate your existence. And this brutal monotony would mask an even more devastating blow to the modern mind, the total collapse of its identity. The first shock wouldn't be physical, it would be existential. Who are you when no one can like you? When no one can photograph you? When your existence leaves no digital trace, an average teenager receives about 150 validations a day through likes, comments, and shares. Their brain has been literally shaped by this constant feedback. Neuroimaging studies show that each notification releases dopamine, the same neurotransmitter, activated by drugs and food. You're biologically addicted to digital validation. In the Middle Ages, your validation would come exclusively from how much you produced. It didn't matter if you were feeling sad today or if you looked amazing. Your worth wasn't measured by followers, but by how many sheaves of wheat you could tie before sunset. Your likes would be the difference between surviving the winter or starving to death. Emma, a 16-year-old from London, participated in a digital abstinence experiment in 2022. After just 3 days without social media, she reported, "I felt like I had ceased to exist, like I wasn't average reality." This feeling would be your permanent reality. You would be invisible to the world beyond your village. Personal reinvention, a fundamental concept for Generation Z, would be impossible. There's no starting over. There's no finding your true self. Your place in society is determined at birth. Son of a peasant. You're a peasant, daughter of a baker. You'll be someone's wife, probably before you're 14. Social mobility isn't difficult. It's practically non-existent. The question that would mentally destroy Generation Z is, what if your existence isn't remarkable? What if no one but 30 people in a village ever knows you existed? A study from Oxford University revealed that 78% of young people between the ages of 16 and 24 consider leaving a legacy or being remembered to be very important. In the Middle Ages, the idea that ordinary people should be remembered would have been considered absurd, even heretical. Only kings, saints, and heroes were worthy of remembrance. Instagrammable moments simply wouldn't exist. There would be no perfect sunset to photograph, no beautiful meal to share, no outfit of the day to post. Life would be endless work, without record, without audience, without the possibility of going viral. The concept of sharing experiences would be limited to stories told around the campfire, if you had the energy to tell them after 14 hours of physical labor. Psychologist Zheng has documented how the identity of modern youth is externally constructed, dependent on constant feedback and validation from others. In the Middle Ages, your identity would be imposed from the outside, but with no possibility of adjustment or customization. There's no such thing as finding your tribe online. There is no niche community. You belong to a single tribe, the same as your ancestors for generations. Thomas, our medieval youth, would never question who he truly is. His identity is clear: son of William, blacksmith's apprentice, Christian English, without nuance, without complexity, without existential crisis. The brutal clarity of this existence, without the comfort of modern ambiguity, would be psychologically crushing for minds accustomed to identity fluidity. The deepest existential horror would come from the complete lack of record. When you die in the Middle Ages, it's as if you never existed. There are no photos, videos, posts, comments. There is no digital trace. Your decades-long existence would be reduced to perhaps a mention in a parish register, and a few memories that would die with your contemporaries. For a generation that documents every meal, every thought, every emotion, this would be the true apocalypse, the impossibility of proving you existed. And while you grappled with this existential crisis, you would simultaneously face the most immediate and brutal challenge: surviving with skills you simply do not possess. And while you struggled with this devastating existential crisis, an even more brutal reality loomed. Survival would require skills you simply didn't possess. YouTube tutorials wouldn't save you now. Your theoretical knowledge, impressive as it might be, would be completely useless. A survey of 18 to 24-year-olds revealed that 86% didn't know how to light a fire without matches. 79% couldn't identify edible plants. 91% had never planted or harvested food. 73% didn't know how to preserve food without refrigeration. In the Middle Ages, these weren't special skills. They were the basics for surviving the dawn. Can you make a fire without matches? Recognize edible plants, butcher an animal, sew a wound, build a shelter. No, you're already dead, and it's not a quick death. It's a slow, painful one, completely avoidable for any medieval 7-year-old. The medieval scholar knew fewer facts than a modern elementary school student, but their practical knowledge was incomparably superior. A 10-year-old would know how to identify dozens of plants, understand weather patterns, predict storms, track animals, repair tools, and preserve food. In a 2021 experiment, a group of college students were challenged to survive a weekend on a farm without modern technology, electricity, or supplies. After 48 hours, 7 of the 10 participants had dropped out. One developed severe dehydration due to not knowing how to properly purify water. Another suffered burns trying to cook over an open fire. Your ability to research how to cure an infection would be replaced by the brutal reality of watching your fingers slowly rot after a simple cut. Your ability to order food from iFood would be replaced by the need to produce, preserve, and rationalize it for an entire year. Your expertise in editing TikTok videos wouldn't help you fix a roof before a storm. The difference between knowing about and knowing how to do has never been so lethal. You may know the theory of fermentation, but could you brew safe beer when clean water is unavailable? You may have read about natural childbirth, but would you help your sister give birth without medical assistance? You know what causes infection, but you'd pull a tooth without anesthesia. Historian Ian Mortimer notes that a 16-year-old in medieval England mastered approximately 50 to 100 practical survival skills. The modern equivalent might have 5, and most of them depend on modern infrastructure. The cruel irony. You probably know more about the Middle Ages than any peasant who actually lived through them. You know historical facts, economic systems, social structures. He knew none of this, but he would survive where you would die in days. I can do this. I just need the right tutorial. It's a common phrase from Generation Z. In the Middle Ages, there are no tutorials. There is only trial, error, and immediate consequences. Knowledge isn't something you consume. It's something you incorporate through years of practice, under constant supervision. A medieval apprentice spent 7 to 10 years learning a single craft, working side by side with a master every day, from dawn to dusk. Author Sebastian Junger, who has studied pre-modern societies, concludes, "The most dangerous feature of modern life is the dissociation between knowledge and survival. When your phone dies, you don't just lose entertainment, you lose almost all your ability to survive without modern structures." An illiterate medieval youth, considered ignorant by modern standards, possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of his immediate environment. Every plant, every animal, every climatic variation, every construction and preservation technique, his knowledge was not broad, but it was deep. And most importantly, it was literally embedded in his muscles, in his physical memory, in his instincts. And as you desperately tried to apply theoretical knowledge to practical survival, you simultaneously faced a physical reality that no Instagram filter could mitigate. And even if you miraculously mastered these survival skills, your body, this carefully hydrated, supplemented, and filtered modern temple, would face unprecedented physical collapse. Comfort is not just a modern luxury. It is a barrier that protects us from the brutal reality of the human body. You wake up in the morning and take a hot shower, brush your teeth and apply deodorant, put on clean clothes. In the Middle Ages, you would wake up in the same body you slept in for months without a full bath. The concept of a daily bath would be considered dangerous to your health, possibly fatal. You would take a lucky bath once a year, usually in the spring. The rest of the time, perhaps wash your hands and face occasionally. The result? Your body would be a walking ecosystem. The Cambridge University study analyzing medieval mummies found an average of 7 to 9 different species of parasites per body. Lice on the scalp, fleas in clothes, intestinal worms that could grow up to 9 meters long inside you. These are not exceptions, they are guaranteed. Your concept of pain would be completely redefined. That headache you treat with Tylenol in the Middle Ages could be the beginning of a slow death. Toothaches, which today mean a visit to the dentist, would be constant companions until the tooth rotted completely or was pulled without anesthesia. A study of medieval skeletons shows that 95% of adults by the time you're 30, you'd already lost multiple teeth. The same body you flaunt with filters on Instagram would be unrecognizable within weeks. Skin marred by rashes, untreated wounds, and scars from trivial accidents. Your teeth, untreated since birth, would begin to rot in your teens. Your nails would be broken from constant work. Your hair, rarely washed, would be cut short to minimize lice or hidden under bonnets and hats for practical and religious reasons. The odor would be inescapable, not only your own but also that of everyone around you. Sweat, excrement, decaying food, animals. Historian Robert Bartlett describes how even medieval nobility lived in environments we would consider unbearable. The smell inside a medieval castle would be a mixture of urine, dried feces, smoked meat, sweat, wood smoke, and rancid fat. A young influencer who participated in a 3-day historical recreation in 2022 described, "After 72 hours without modern hygiene products, my skin itched constantly. My hair was so greasy it felt wet, and the smell of my own body made me nauseous. I couldn't imagine living like this permanently." Privacy, a fundamental concept for modern teenagers, simply wouldn't exist. You would sleep in the same room, often in the same bed, with your entire family. Every bodily function would be known to everyone. Every moment of intimacy, every vulnerability, every physical change would be observed and commented on. An anthropological study of medieval dwellings suggests that the average living space per person was approximately 2 square meters, less than a modern bathroom stall. Temperature would be another constant torment. Without central heating, winters meant months of piercing cold. Poorly insulated houses, with windows covered by fabric or wood, let in wind and humidity. In summer, the heat would be equally oppressive, with no fans, no air conditioning, no refreshing shower. You would sleep in sweat-damp clothes, work under the scorching sun, and have no escape. Food, lacking modern variety and hygiene, would be a constant source of discomfort. Bread was stale, often moldy. Meat, when available, preserved in salt to the point of being nearly inedible. Vegetables limited by seasonality, and often wilted or partially rotted by the end of winter. Your digestive system, accustomed to processed foods and purified water, would collapse with constant diarrhea. And when your body inevitably succumbed to some disease that today would be treatable with a $5 pill, you would face the ultimate horror. Medieval medicine, often worse than the disease itself, but beyond the constant physical pain, beyond the lack of skills, beyond the identity crisis, you would face perhaps the most silent and relentless killer of all, the existential boredom of a world devoid of stimulation. And while your body struggled against this brutal physical reality, your mind would face an even more relentless killer: boredom. Not that fleeting Sunday afternoon boredom, an endless existential void with no escape, no relief, no end in sight. The real killer wouldn't be hunger or illness. It would be the complete lack of mental stimulation for a brain addicted to digital dopamine. An average teenager today consumes approximately 8 hours of digital content daily. Their brain processes more information in a single day than a medieval person did in an entire year. Neurological studies show that this constant bombardment literally rewires your brain, creating neural pathways dependent on constant novelty, immediate rewards, and varied stimuli. You consume more information in a single 10-minute scroll than a medieval person did in their entire life. Think about it. In an hour on TikTok, you see hundreds of different faces, dozens of songs, multiple lifestyles, diverse cultures, contradictory ideas. A medieval peasant could go decades without seeing a new face, hearing a different song, or encountering a challenging idea. The absolute rarity of books made written knowledge virtually inaccessible. A handwritten Bible cost approximately the annual salary of a skilled laborer. Even if you knew how to read, 95% of people didn't know exactly what you would read. There are no public libraries, bookstores, or newsstands. The concept of reading for pleasure simply didn't exist for most people. A 2014 University of Chicago experiment placed young people in empty rooms for just 15 minutes, without phones or distractions. 67% of men and 25% of women preferred administering painful electric shocks to themselves rather than being alone with their thoughts. 15 minutes. Now imagine that emptiness for decades. Nights would be your personal hell, from dusk to dawn until 4 p.m. in winter. You would face near total darkness. No Netflix, no Spotify, no games, no messages. Just darkness, silence, and perhaps a few stories you've heard 100 times. Candles, an expensive luxury item, would be used only for essential tasks, not for pastime. A psychologist who has studied sensory deprivation observes, the modern human brain, conditioned for high-speed processing, goes into panic and dysregulation modes when deprived of stimuli, literally a form of torture. Prisoners in isolation often report hallucinations after just 48 hours without stimuli. Your starved brain creates input when it doesn't receive it externally. Music, now infinitely available, would be a rarity heard only on special occasions. church festivals, harvest celebrations, and even stories and performances, without radio, videos, or streaming. You could go months without hearing a melody not sung by your own family. For a generation that flips between tabs, when a 15-second video seems too long, the existential slowdown of medieval times would be psychologically devastating. A Microsoft study suggests that the average attention span has decreased from 12 seconds in 2000 to 8 seconds in 2023. A modern teenager, unable to focus on a single task for more than a few minutes, would face days, weeks, months of relentless repetition. Their brain, accustomed to constant digital dopamine, would simply collapse within days. This isn't an exaggeration. It's basic neuroscience. Dopamine withdrawal causes real physical symptoms: anxiety, depression, an inability to feel pleasure, difficulty concentrating, even symptoms similar to drug withdrawal. The most stimulated generation in human history, suddenly deprived of its constant stream of novelty, would face not just boredom, but a form of neurological death. Your brain, literally unable to process the void, would begin to crumble in on itself. But perhaps ironically, in this existential collapse, you would rediscover something we lost long ago. And yet in the midst of this neurological collapse, this abyss of boredom and suffering, something unexpected might emerge. Like an addict undergoing painful detox, your brain would eventually readjust. And in this readjustment, you might rediscover human capacities you never knew you had lost, but not all would be lost. Some things we sacrificed on the altar of modernity would resurface. Neurologist Dr. Michael Merzenich, a pioneer in neuroplasticity, observes, when we remove hyperstimulation, the brain initially panics, but after about 3 weeks, it begins to rewire itself in surprising ways, recovering capabilities that were atrophied by excessive technology use. The first rediscovery would be the depth of human connections. A 2023 study revealed that teenagers have an average of 300+ social media connections, but only 2.1 friendships they consider deep and meaningful. In the Middle Ages, your connections would have been limited in number, but vastly deeper. When you spend your entire life with the same 30 people, you know them in a way that is impossible in the digital age. Not just their preferences and opinions, but every facial expression, every mood, every vulnerability. Research shows that humans can discern more than 250 emotional states in familiar faces, a skill that atrophies when replaced by emojis. The same generation that can't have a 5-minute conversation without checking their phone would discover the power of being fully present. Modern fragmented attention, we switch tasks on average every 40 seconds, would be replaced by a deep immersion in immediate reality. Anthropologists studying pre-technological cultures document states of sustained attention that seem almost supernatural to modern observers. Your memory, now outsourced to Google and smartphone notes, would expand dramatically. Oral cultures developed mnemonic capabilities that seem impossible today. Medieval bards memorized epic poems of 50,000 words. Merchants mentally tracked hundreds of complex transactions. Your mind, freed from the digital crutch, would relearn how to retain and process information as we have for millennia. You would rediscover the innate spatial orientation that GPS and digital maps have atrophied. Studies of indigenous peoples show that humans can develop internal compasses so precise that they navigate dense forests without visible landmarks. This capacity, encoded in our DNA by hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, would re-emerge after the painful period of readjustment. The deep satisfaction of productive manual labor would replace the perceived futility of digital labor. Neuroscientists have discovered that creating tangible objects activates reward centers in the brain that remain dormant during virtual activities. A modern young person who learned to bake bread, build a chair, or grow food would experience a form of neurological satisfaction that endless social media feeds simply cannot provide. Perhaps most surprisingly, you would rediscover the value of creative boredom. Psychologists identify productive boredom as essential for cognitive development. In the absence of external stimuli, the brain turns inward, generating original ideas, creative solutions, and deep self-knowledge. The same condition that initially caused your mental breakdown could eventually awaken the creativity that constant distraction suppresses. A sense of community and interdependence would replace modern isolation disguised as connectivity. Anthropologists studying traditional communities consistently observe much lower levels of depression and anxiety, despite challenging material conditions. The explanation? Authentic social connections and a clear purpose within the community. The real lesson is not that the Middle Ages were better, it clearly wasn't. It's that we lost some fundamental human capacities while we gained comfort and technology. The price of convenience was higher than we realized. As philosopher Nicholas Carr wrote, "What we're losing is not just our past, but essential parts of our humanity. Capabilities that evolved over millions of years are being erased in a generation." If this time travel has messed with your head, if for a moment you imagined your smartphone disappearing, and the panic that would follow, you've already experienced a fragment of this parallel reality. And perhaps you've realized that that thumbs up isn't just a digital gesture. It's a way of acknowledging that, as much as we complain about technology, there's a chasm separating us from our ancestors that none of us would truly want to cross. In the comments, tell me which aspect of medieval life you think would be the most unbearable: the endless boredom, the lack of privacy, or simply the absence of your precious smartphone. This conversation between eras is fascinating because it reveals as much about us as it does about the past. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, this is your chance to join a community that doesn't just consume history, but experiences it viscerally. Each new video is a time machine that transports you to realities your Instagram would never show. Share it with that friend who panics when their battery drops below 20%, or that older relative who keeps saying things were better back in the day. You both need this dose of historical reality. And speaking of time machines, the video appearing on your screen now will transport you to another moment in history, where humanity faced a challenge that would make our digital abstinence seem like a walk in the park. A time when surviving until dawn was considered a victory, and where our modern technology would be as useless as a TikToker trying to harvest wheat. Because in the end, understanding these historical distances isn't just fascinating, it's a way to appreciate both what we've lost and what we've gained on the journey that brought us here. Comfortably watching this video instead of struggling to survive in a world without filters, literally.